We are live. Good afternoon for everyone that's just jumping on online. We'll start the webinar in around 5 minutes, just to allow a few people to get online before we get started. Thanks everyone for joining so far. This is the 5th and final day of our NX Security Week. It's been a great week so far, with presentations from Vivotech, all about how cameras work and function, and how to pick the right cameras when. Also, WSM came in and did a great talk on how to specify hardware, especially with like custom solutions these days. It's always important to make sure you get the right hardware for the need of the job. Then we had Seagate come in and they kind of talked about some pretty cool stuff in terms of what's coming out in the surveillance industry. They talked about big data and how much data is created, which is written in general strategy in terms of centralized storage or storage. And they also talked about the new technology, Hammer technology, which looks really cool. Potentially 50 terabytes on a drive, which is leaps and bounds, considering I remember when we would only be able to get 2 terabytes on a drive. So that's pretty cool stuff. And then we had a great talk yesterday from Rob Dupre from VCA, who was talking about the history and kind of how AI works, machine learning versus deep learning. And kind of what the future holds and what's available. This is what's really that solid. So definitely, if you missed any of those, they should be all up on YouTube next week at some point. So definitely worth checking them out. As I've said before, they are available to anyone, end users, system installers, distributors, consultants, anyone that's just interested. Feel free to share them around. They're really good transfer of knowledge for new people in the industry, old people in the industry that just feel like a refresher. I found I definitely learned a few things from each of the webinars, and I've been involved in the industry for a while, so definitely worth checking those out. As I said, we'll get the presentation going in a couple of minutes, just to allow a few more people to come online. But we do have our entire team, well, not our entire team, we do have a large amount of our team with us today. So Oscar, who's been on most of them, is actually sharing a video today, so we can actually see who he is. So Oscar's the Director of Surveillance and Security for our team. Sergey's online as well, who's the manager for Eastern Europe for our team. And then we also have Tony Luce, who is our marketing director, and actually added a lot of value, especially in today's presentation, because he's got a lot of experience from the installation, distribution, and manufacturing side of security. So there's a lot of value in this presentation today from kind of a lot of people's knowledge in our company, but also, as I said, Tony was previously a big part of a company called ICD over in Asia, which was kind of like a premium installer for multinationals. So he's kind of seen the benefits and the pros and the cons of system installation from every kind of angle. So a lot of information in the presentation. So we'll just give it a couple more minutes and then we'll get kicked off. If anyone wants to introduce themselves from our team, feel free.
Anybody?
So,
like James mentioned, I was in integration originally, in security integration. So I've been on the side of people speccing out projects and doing and implementing projects. And I was a general manager of the integration company, so I got to see the whole cycle of things, and from the sales cycle all the way to the support cycle. Then I worked for a manufacturer. I actually worked for Linnell, UTC Fire and Security. So then I got to see the manufacturer side. And then James and I actually worked together in China doing distribution and integration after Linnell and UTC. And then we ended up finding our way over to Network Optix here. So we've been on both sides of, we've been on many sides of the equation here. The only real one we never was an end user, because we always put in our own systems. So.
But we've dealt with a lot of end users along the way, that's for sure.
And Oscar, you started off with the IP camera side of things, right?
Right. I started with Acti about 10 years ago, like back when they're one of the top 5 manufacturers. And then I moved to Bricom. So I've been on the camera side most of the time. Now with Optix, it's been what, 5.5 years? It's been great. I think Sergey was also on the camera side, right, Sergey? On the Panasonic.
Yeah, I did a business for Panasonic just for a year. But I started developing business for Ukrainian distribution company. Later, I joined Pelco by Schneider Electric. Later, several years, I tried to develop special, like customized software development for Swiss customers. And later, I joined NX.
Sergey's got the best matching hair and beard, I gotta say.
Yeah, I got a ginger beard and a brown hair. I'm already sure.
That's unexpected. I didn't expect you to have a ginger beard. And
It's the Irish and the Scottish in me.
Where's your beard? I mean, where's your COVID beard? That's the question.
Like, even if I try to grow, it's just like here, man. It doesn't grow anywhere here, you know. I get some here and some here, that's all.
Cool, right. Okay, we've allowed enough time for everyone to jump on now. So let me share my screen. We can get into things.
So one thing to note is the chat and the QA. I'm not sure if James said it or not, but the chat and the QA are open throughout the presentation, and we encourage you guys to ask questions because it's a pretty general presentation.
Yeah, so for sure. So sorry, just to reiterate, as this kind of slide says, there's a lot of information in this. Like I said, Tony put a lot of effort into kind of creating a really good kind of walkthrough of the whole system design process, from gathering requirements, how to kind of get to the bottom of the requirement, all the way through to design, delivery, handover. So we're going to kind of roll through it quite quickly and kind of make it more of a open forum kind of question presentation. So this morning when we did it, we had a lot of questions coming in as we were going along, and kind of discussions on questions rather than just sticking to a strict structure. So please, everybody, use the Q&A and the chat. If you don't want to use the Q&A and chat, or you have my number, Oscar's number, or Sergey's number, feel free to shoot us WhatsApp questions, because I know Oscar was getting those today as well. So on that note, let's get kicked into it. I think most of you are from the attendees list have been on a few of these, but just for those that haven't, this whole security week has been about kind of a transfer of knowledge from some of the industry leading professionals to kind of use some of their knowledge and just let other people know about the trends and the educational side of the industry. Usually, obviously, each year we do a lot of expos, and in the expos there's lectures or seminar sessions that kind of are aimed at kind of talking about future trends, talking about the educational side, as I said. So we wanted to try and recreate that, as we believe, as part of being a responsible manufacturer, is not just pushing product down at everybody, but also educating people along the way. So hopefully everyone gets a lot of benefit out of this. And if you have missed any of the previous sessions, feel free to jump online next week. They should go up on our YouTube with all the presentations. They'll also be available at the my.networkoptics.com kind of portal for all our partners. So feel free to jump on there. And if you have trouble finding them, reach out to us, direct you to them. Cool. So let's get started. So this is kind of like the design line. This is pretty much the process as we see it. And like I said, a lot of us come from different parts. We've all been, distribution system installers, even consulting. So we kind of see a lot of the areas that have issues along the whole design line, especially as from the manufacturer side. If an end user has a problem, they tend to come to us if they keep having the same problem. Same with the system installer, same with the distributor. So we're kind of like that top level where everyone, when they have enough trouble, come to us. So we kind of see where those issues lie. So the real kind of crux are like the gathering of requirements and analyzing them to make sure you are actually delivering a system that fits the customer's needs. You haven't twisted it into something different. They have actually articulated exactly correctly, and then designing off of that. That's the kind of core of it, the first three. If you get those first three things right, the last three should be quite easy. So we're really going to focus on those first three. The last three, there's a lot of content in here, but we kind of will brush over quite quickly. As I said, you're more than welcome to download it and really get your teeth into the presentation. So jumping into it, so one of the main things I always like to kind of target people at people to understand is if a customer wants a specific feature, it is good to understand why a customer wants that feature. If they tell you like, oh yeah, I want like the ability to track someone around an entire building, that's cool, but it's good to understand why they want that feature, because it might not be the best feature for them. Because we've had a lot of people where they implement a feature based on someone asking for something, and then at the end of the road, it doesn't actually do what they wanted it to do. They've just been told, or they've seen it online, that that's cool. So as an example, I had a large system that's 500 cameras. They wanted the ability to track someone around an entire site. And obviously that's quite expensive because you're adding facial recognition to 500 cameras. A lot of hardware. Basically narrowed it down, asking them why they wanted this. It was because they had one room where people were stealing items from. So instead of tracking someone around the whole site, you could just put a facial recognition camera at each of the entrances and exits to the room that had the issue, and basically lower the entire cost of the system and actually deliver probably a smoother system, because you're not trying to integrate too much information into one platform. So it's really important to not just go and say, okay, the customer wants this, let's do this. It's better to understand the objective of that feature so you can actually recommend a better feature or make sure that the feature fits what they are looking for. And we get that a lot being manufacturer, because it kind of comes upstream to us from the system installer to the distributor to then ask us what we recommend. And that's where I always kick it back down to ask what the goal of that feature is. So that's kind of important. Sorry, go on, Tony.
To add to that, the best way to get to the heart of what they want is ask them what they are trying to do. Like, can you explain to me what are you trying to do? And then they'll have to frame it outside of like a technical perspective, right? And then that way you, with your technical knowledge, can tell them, okay, well, you're trying to prevent this behavior. Okay, there's different ways of approaching that, and like this is the way that I would recommend, right? Because a lot of times, even with video, if it's prevention, a video's changing. It's always been an event review technology, but it's not a preventative technology, and making sure your customers understand that is important. Nowadays, with the AI analytics and the object recognition and everything, it's becoming more of a preventative solution. But at the same time, you really need to understand what are they trying, what behavior are they trying to prevent? What behavior are they trying to review, right? That's what's important, because that lets you set up the system to address that specific behavior or set of behaviors. So, yeah.
Sure. Yes, there's one other thing I really want to highlight on this page. Obviously, it's all quite important, but we don't want to drag on. If there isn't an RFP for the system, write what you've understood from their requirement and give it back to them. The amount of times that writing stuff down is just clarifies and makes people completely understand what the situation is so much better than doing it verbally. I get it all the time. Even a couple of days ago, we had people saying that we could do a feature that someone had told them that we could do, but we actually can't do that feature. And it's just, it happens a lot where verbally someone may have just misunderstood what you said, and then basically they take it in a different way. So you need to make sure it's written down so you kind of go back to it and reference it. So it's just a better way of communicating on the phone and just saying something quickly. You don't know if someone's fully understanding. So writing down and sharing that information is really important. So we'll jump through. So schedule a site survey. It's always really important to obviously understand the system. Even when people ask us questions, I try to refrain from just answering off the whim before I have a proper understanding of the system or what they're trying to achieve. Because if you just give some indications of what a feature could be, then people can tend to take that and run with it without you actually committing. It creates some confusion.
Go back one fast. I mean, one of the most important things about the site survey, in my experience, is just the camera locations and mounting conditions. Because you may want to put a certain type of camera in one location, but there might not be a way to actually install it there, right? So just getting a good idea of the environment to make sure that you don't have to do some sort of change order later on, and then you have an extra camera that you don't, that you bought, right? So just making sure to document where everything's going to be physically is really important, just to save you time and money, and make sure that the stuff that you're speccing in is going to be is going to fit on that actual physical site as well. Go ahead.
Yeah. No, we had I've had similar issues with that, where like if someone kind of wants to mount it on a pole, but they haven't really told them there's a pole there, and then you don't have the bracket to mount on a pole, and then you've got to go back the next day, and all it just creates a lot of additional work and cost on the site. So yeah, once you've kind of analyzed your requirements, as we were saying before, like once you've got all the requirements, analyze them, actually bring them all together and turn them from a requirement into an actual feature set. So like we were saying at the beginning, if the customer just has like, oh, we need kind of roughly to go view on our mobile, be able to maybe even unlock a gate from a soft button, then you want to turn that into, okay, so we need, for instance, cloud services to be able to view via mobile. We need some IO boards to be able to trigger the gate inside the system. So really kind of turning all the information into like an actual kind of feature list, and then give all that additional information back to your customer as well, so they can kind of see exactly how that equates, and then get them to confirm basically that those features kind of meet the objectives of what they're trying to achieve. So yeah, similar to basically checking the system that you've designed is going to hit the requirements. So as I said, I'm going to skip over some of these just in the effort of time, kind of getting more to the design section as well. So this is something I will touch on though, is like there's no one platform that will fit everybody's needs, and it's kind of part of the core concept of NX is the extensibility. Those of you who have been on, I talk about it quite a lot at the beginning of everything. We are aware that our platform won't meet every single requirement, but we have all the tools, APIs, and partners available to meet most requirements and most verticals. So we have an online kind of marketplace or kind of cloud plugin store that basically has listed all the current integration partners that we are aware of. Doesn't mean that there's not an integration, just means that they haven't spoken to us, because all our tools are freely available. So if someone does need, for instance, like we were talking about before, facial recognition, no, we don't do it ourselves, but we do have a bunch of integration partners that run facial recognition, all have their own set of features to really fit the requirements of a customer. So it's good to always check on here to see that obviously if you're using NX as a core, that we can meet all the customer requirements with all our integrations. And while I'm on this page, we actually had a question come in for the morning session that I'll reiterate. They were saying if there is a requirement and there isn't an integration available on our web store, is it possible to get an integration? So one of the nice things about NX is all our tools are available without even having to talk to us. We have a REST API for really fast and smooth integrations. We have a NX Meta plugin that allows you to do kind of deeper AI style integrations, and we have storage SDKs and video source SDKs that basically allow you to integrate. We don't do integrations ourselves. We recommend third parties that we've worked with, but we do support them with our devs and our kind of support team. Will support the integration engineers doing the work. We mainly don't do them because it's usually better for the person integrating into our platform, as they know their own software a lot better. But yeah, so there's definitely a way of doing it. And if you need assistance, we're there to help. So if you do have a project that needs a specific integration, reach out to us. We can tell you the best way to achieve that, and kind of put you in touch with the developers or third parties that might be available to do it. Also worth talking to the other system that needs integrated. They might have policy.
Yeah. There's the other thing with us is, a lot of times with third party, let's say the more traditional legacy VMSs, the tools that they have for integration are pretty complex, and they require a pretty high level of knowledge. One of the things we have is just generic events, right? So integrators have the control of their own destiny in a lot of places, because most of the time your integration is really simple. When this happens, sends an event to the video system, right? That's the primary use case for integrations most of the time. All right, I want to get an alert in the video system. I want to pull up the video. Generic events allow you to do instant integrations, and you don't have to be technical to do it. We have videos that explain how to do it. All you really need is some third-party system that supports HTTP events, and that's it. And most of the systems these days, modern systems, support that type of thing. So just something to keep in mind is that you can do integrations yourself. You just got to get familiar with our create event API call in our HTTP generic events. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no, it's actually when we talked before about the fact that we've been to shows before, and someone's had like an IP-based PIR detector or something on the booth next to us, and within 10 minutes we've actually got integrated without assistance from engineers or anything. So it is a pretty powerful way to get integrations done quick. So that's why I said if it's not listed on the marketplace here, doesn't mean it's not doable right now. It just means that we aren't aware of it ourselves yet. So definitely worth reaching out to us and to see how we can help with any of these. All right, so system design, kind of going into more like the actual designing of the system. So picking the cameras, we're not going to go too far into this. What I would recommend is going and checking out Vivatech's presentation they did on Monday. It will, as I said, it'll be uploaded next week. Maxim from Vivatech did a great presentation about what makes up the camera, what cameras to use where, what bodies to use based on if someone's going to hit it, if people can potentially whack it with a baseball bat, all these kind of things, and then the future of cameras as well. So rather than covering it here, I would recommend go check that out. The only thing I will say, which is the comment at the bottom there, is it doesn't matter what backend you put into a system. If you use crappy cameras, you will end up with a pretty unsatisfied customer.
And this is, I was going to say, this is just step one in the system. You got to decide your camera hardware before you start with anything else, because your camera hardware, the resolution, the frame rate, like the capabilities is going to determine what you do downstream from that, right? Like your storage, your compute hardware, your networking needs are all going to be determined by what type of camera you choose to use.
Yeah, so I mean, if you put in a too high-end camera, that's never going to be a problem, right? Because you can always downscale resolution and frame rate, but the software is never going to be able to upscale it. So,
or if you pick a camera that's not stable for some reason, right? We're not going to get into specific brands or anything like that, but some camera manufacturers are known for really nice stability and never really having issues, right? Regular firmware updates, all that kind of stuff, and other camera manufacturers aren't, right? So if you're ordering it off of Alibaba, probably not a great idea, right? If the project is important to you. So
yeah, for sure. All right, cool. And then also when you are designing kind of your peripheral devices, don't forget to take into account kind of additional ones that a lot of people miss off and you have to add them later. So things like IP speakers will work with NX for pre-recorded messages through them, encoders as well, or we can even bring in potentially if it's a retrofit, NVRs and DVRs can come in as an encoder. So you need to make sure that the devices on site are actually supported, which you can do on our website. If you go to my.optix.com, we have a camera tool there. You type in the model and see if it's actually supported as an encoder device, or if not, do you need to add actual encoders? And then I/O devices, obviously, for when we talked about gates or trigger third-party hardwired events, and then intercoms as well. I've just got given a 2N intercom actually for testing, and all the video streams and two-way audio and everything works with our system as well. So make sure that you use an intercom that works with the VMS that we're using, which hopefully will be NX, should be NX. So first thing to do once you've kind of figured out all your peripheral devices is work out what your storage and your throughputs are going to be, because this is the most important point at this point. If you don't put in a good enough network switch, your whole system is going to suffer. If you don't have enough storage, your whole system is going to suffer. Obviously, these are estimates. This is something to point out. So always make sure that you build a buffer, because we don't know what your cameras are looking at. And people don't realize, but the difference between a camera that's just looking at an empty car park for most of the time versus a camera that might be like in a tool shop that's constantly looking at benches and tools and has a lot of data in the screen, have a huge difference on their actual megabits per second stream. So we can't calculate that. Obviously, we do it to the best of our ability, But if you've got 200 cameras all in really complex script scenes, it's going to be a lot larger cameras that are just a bunch of car parks or looking at fields, because it's a lot easier the way that H.264 codec works to block encode large amounts of kind of blank data versus lots of small. So we do these estimates obviously to the best of our ability, but one of the really cool things about NX is inside of our software, once you have actually installed all the cameras, you can actually go and test based off of, within 5 minutes, you can say, take the last 5 minutes of data and actually tell me how many days I get based on the storage I have in the system. So this gives you your estimate. That gives you a pretty accurate depiction of what you can get, which means rather than wait until day 30 and someone telling you, oh, 5 days ago, someone stole something, you go, oh, we don't have the data. Or sorry, 29 days ago, someone stole something, so we don't have the data anymore. You can go and install the system, check a day later, hit forecast and see, all right, I'm going to get 32 days based on the actual real world bit rate of cameras, to get a better kind of clearer picture of what you're going to get from your storage. On top of that, when you are calculating your bandwidth and your storage, always try and add like a large amount or a decent 10-20% extra to make sure you kind of future-proof it as well. So if someone wants to add a couple more cameras, you're not really at the kind of threshold where you have to add in a whole bunch of hard drives, a whole new servers. Otherwise, you're going to end up with a very annoyed customer thinking that the cost of adding two more cameras is going to be a huge expense versus just adding to existing infrastructure.
And for this one, I just wanted to say, when you do the calculation, right? At the beginning of our calculator, we have the project information, who's creating this calculation, what the project information is. This is something we made so that you guys could share this with the customer too. So think of it like insurance for your system design in terms of, hey, look, this is what if you're using NX, this is what NX recommends in terms of like the hardware and here's the estimated throughput and all that sort of stuff. So this is why I designed the system this way, right? It also you're just being really transparent with the customer. Hey, this is exactly how I designed the system, right? So that, in terms of building a relationship with your customer, you're being as transparent as possible. You're showing them, another way of saying it is just showing them your work, right? Here you go. Like, this is how I started. So but make sure to share that with the customer in proposal form, or even at the beginning, before you start implementing it.
Okay, so Guillaume from France is going to need a remote control with someone from NX because we've never been able to use the calculator.
I've never been able to use the calculator. All right.
It's probably his salesperson probably didn't tell him there's a calculator, which is me, by the way. Okay. I'll message you later, Guillaume. Thanks for that. Thanks for throwing me under the bus in front of everyone. Cool. So kind of more about the calculator on the system design side. This kind of also helps you recommend you hardware based on the information you put into the calculator. So this kind of spits out that full report, like you're saying. So definitely worth checking out.
The key points about this one is just you're deciding your server hardware, right? So you want more. Too much juice is better than too little juice when you're doing hardware, server hardware and client hardware, right? So when you're doing your server hardware, consider it local. Is it available locally, or do you have to import it, right? What's the warranty and maintenance on it? What are the special features and capabilities of it, if it has any? And then of course the last thing is the price. Right. Don't decide your server hardware based off the price alone, please. I mean, the reality is that in an IP video system, the amount of costs that go into it, a lot of it is cabling and like installation. It's a people cost, right? The server cost itself, overall is not going to be a huge percentage of the project. It's going to be cameras and cabling. It's going to be like 50% of the project probably, right? And then you got the server cost is going to be 10 to 20%, 30% of the project, depending on how many drives you're using, right? So it's not going to be your biggest factor, but it is going to be the thing that's going to kill your system if you buy really cheap server hardware that fails. So remember that.
Like I said, it's always good to think about future proofing as well. So If you've got 128 cameras, probably don't put 128 cameras on one server. Otherwise, if someone wants to add one camera, now you have to add an entire server and add a lot of additional cost.
Yeah, and remember, our server hive architecture allows you to use more lightweight server hardware and replicate it so that you have more redundancy in the system, right? That is a key differentiator between network optics and other VMSs that you're competing with. And you should really beat the hell out of that with the customer. You should beat that drum. Like my system design is different because the architecture of the system is different. So.
Yeah. So speaking about architecture, this is what we're going to jump into now. So just to give you an idea of the architectures that are out there, we're going to cover a little bit about the Hive architecture. So the three main architectures you see in VMS solutions is sort of like your client connected architecture, which is where it's more the NVR style. So every server operates independently, or NVR operates independently. The only thing that ties them together is a client computer. So the problem is there, if you've got a new client or a new system, you then have to reconnect to each individual server. There's no cross communication. So it's kind of what I would call a dumb architecture. And then that was kind of like an older architecture. Then we went to what's called the central server or the central management server architecture, which is probably what most VMS companies use right now, which is where you have all your recording servers, and then they all have to communicate to a single central management server, which then allows you to basically log in and receive all your system, and then have kind of health benefits by being managed by the server. Obviously, the downside to that is if the additional server goes down, you lose kind of a lot of the system that way. Some systems will pretty much be unconnectable with that in that scenario, and your licensing's lost and your database is lost. So you need then a redundant server for your management server. So it starts to add quite a lot of total cost of ownership system of the architecture, especially if you're only having two servers. You still need a third server to be the management server. You can't just have two servers. So there's some downsides in the smaller scale systems for the central management server, and then on the large side, there's kind of some potential.
The point of failure is the main point, right?
Yeah,
so like with a federated architecture, they throw that term around a lot. Federated architecture. What it really is just an old school client server architecture where there's at some point there's one giant server that's the kind of key to all of it, and if you take it down, you take the whole thing down. Right. So that's the your central server architecture you're speaking about, James, right?
Yeah.
So
yeah, for sure. Yeah. So then there's the Hive architecture, which, as far as I'm aware, there is no other VMS provider that offers a Hive architecture. That's not one of our powered by NX products anyway. So the Hive architecture gives you all the benefits of a kind of central management server system without having any single point of failure. And you don't have to add extra cost for the additional servers to actually be the management server. What it basically is a lot of separate servers that all cross-communicate with each other. They all become aware of database replication to actually have a full system database on every server. That has a lot of benefits with it, and I'm going to touch on that in the next slide, so I won't go too into it now. And that's just kind of a three different architectures. And it's good to take into account the type of architecture is going to impact your hardware. So like we said before, the client connected one, everything's kind of independent from each other. So that's kind of doesn't really affect your hardware too much. But then your central server, you're going to need additional servers if you're kind of doing failover, if you're doing like for the actual central management server itself. And then Hive, you just kind of your recording servers effectively. Also take into account if it's a multi-site system that you definitely need to cooperate with the IT company. This is a problem that I hit so many times. If there is an IT company or an IT service provider on a site, it is important to definitely tell them what you need before you go to site. The amount of times I have people call me up and say, "Oh, I've got two sites and I can't get connection. My two servers connected together," and then basically it turns out that we just haven't asked the IT company to open the right port.
Firewall port. Yeah.
Exactly. So it's really important to have that cooperation with the IT company. I mean, I've been on sites before where they knew I was coming and I told them exactly what I needed, but I still sat in someone's office for 7 hours waiting to tag a VLAN so I had access to the server. So it's really important to try and be on good terms and cooperate well with the in-house IT guys, because at the end of the day, they're very protective over their infrastructure, which is understandable because IP cameras kick out a lot of data, so it can cause a lot of dramas for them. So it's important just to kind of work with them as best as you can, give them as much information, what ports you need, what ports we'll be using. Well, for us, it's one port. So that's the advantage of NX. We use one port, 7001, or customizable if you want to, for everything. There's most other VMS providers, they have like a client, a server, a database port. There's a lot of ports. So they should like our stuff more. And within reason, if you're using cloud, you don't even really need a port. So, but it's definitely worth giving them as much information as possible. It saves a lot of headaches. I've been called in a lot by system integrators and by distributors in the past to talk to IT to allow them to give us or give the end user or the system integrator the access to actually do. And then the storage architecture is good to kind of figure out based off of what your hardware architecture is going to be. So obviously in a client connected system, things separated. The storage is all on separate devices. Central server, because you have the central management server, which doesn't have storage, then downstream recording. That's kind of a more distributed hardware storage as well. This is where I want to touch on. Again, the Hive allows you to do something a little bit different because of the fact that our system runs really lightweight as well. It kind of opens up a bit more of a centralized storage way of doing things, because we can run really lightweight devices and then push everything back to a really large NAS or SAN array. Which means when it comes to doing things like calculating RAID, you only have to calculate a few disks on a big 48-bay drive rather than having 10 different servers having to RAID disks in each one of those servers. So it helps on your total cost of ownership. But we did a really cool test, which if you check out the Seagate one, they kind of touched on this topic. So definitely go look at the Seagate presentation. We did a cool test where we had 1,000 cameras streaming back to a single Seagate storage array. With 4K, 30 frames per second. So what you could do in that.
We did 3 different tests. We did 1,000. We started off with 1,000 full HD cameras, and it was we were so efficient. We were only running like 38% CPU on this. We were running, by the way, 1,000 full HD cameras on a single Dell R740 PowerEdge server, right? And we had 10 different VMs. Virtual machines running Ubuntu versions of Ubuntu OS and then NX Witness server applications on them. And we were running at each one of them had, I think, 2 virtual CPUs, and we were running about 38% CPU usage. So we decided to crank up the test to 4K. So then we went to 600 4K cameras, and then we went to 1,000 4K cameras, and we ended up at about 88% CPU usage. And then the Seagate 5U84 with 84 8 terabyte drives in it was storing all the video from 1,000 4K cameras at the same time, coming from 10 different VMs, and 0% frame loss. So centralized storage is an option. There's stuff that goes into that, like what type of hardware you're using, what the throughput of that hardware is. The 5U84 is kind of a specialized thing that's really built for cloud architectures, so it's able to handle lots and lots of throughput. You also need a 10 gig network to run 1,000 4K cameras.
Yeah.
But the key point, I guess, is it's super lightweight. You've got different hardware storage strategies. With our scheduled backup, you could do a combination. You could have live footage on the light devices at the edge with much less storage. Then you can have a central NAS device or SAN device, and then you can dump that video once a day to the backup location. And the nice thing about our software is we don't care where that video is stored, right? What we do is we search for, when you go to pull up the video, our server application will search known storage locations to see if that video is available. If it's been moved from one machine to another to the backup machine, and our server will look and say, okay, it's not there anymore, it's in the backup machine, and it'll automatically seamlessly pull it from backup. You don't even need to worry about it, right? We're going to find it. Even if there's duplicate copies, we're still going to pull it from the closest location so that the speed is good. So it's a unique feature with NX Witness. You want to go to the next slide, because I think the architecture maybe.
Yeah, I just want to touch on just one last thing real quick. So to give you an idea, We worked on some projects with Seagate where if you looked at a traditional VMS, for instance, for 1,000 cameras, you'd be looking at 5 to 10 kind of Dell servers with Xeon processors running storage, which means obviously a lot more RAID drives, a lot more kind of complexity, well, not complexity, but a lot more cost built into that hardware infrastructure. Versus, like Tony was saying, we can have smaller edge devices. They could be Intel NUCs, for instance. You can have 10 of those, each with 100 cameras on it. You've got storage enough for maybe 24 hours on the edge. That's recording there and then backs it up to a centralized NAS device. It brings down the cost of ownership quite a lot. And then you also have a little bit of storage redundancy there if the central NAS device goes down or the edge device goes down. So it's kind of duplicated. So yeah, we'll run into more of the Hive architecture here. So I know this was obviously not a product-facing demo, but we need a word from our sponsors, who happen to be us. So we'll talk a little bit about the Hive architecture. It's a question we get a lot, so definitely wanted to touch on it here. So effectively, what is the Hive architecture? So servers in the Hive, they operate independently, but they also operate as part of a Hive. And that's how the kind of the database replication works, because it makes every single server have effectively like a master server. It has the full system database on it. So if you have a Hive system where you've got, let's say, 4 servers like in the diagram, and they're all on separate networks, separate sites, and one of those servers completely falls off and loses communication to the Hive, it still operates fully. Obviously, you won't have access to the other 4 servers or 3 servers anymore, but the server will operate fully on its own. You can still get all the storage. You can still have user information, everything. So that's kind of the way that it works in terms of that database replication. To give you an idea of some of the kind of like advantages you get from that, if you create a user on a system that only has access to one server, that user, when the database is replicated, will be on every single server. So even if the user that only has access to server 1, let's say, logs into server 4, it will still authenticate him and only give him access to the cameras from server 1. So it creates it as if it's a single system. It means that every server is an IP address, is a connection into the Hive. So you're not just stuck to using the one master server that you would in the central kind of setup. Another cool feature of it is it's self-healing. So effectively, if one of the servers falls off and completely breaks, when you put a new server in there, you merge it back in, the whole system database replicates back over it. So all the users are back, all the camera information's back, everything. The only thing you'd have to do is just re-drag the cameras back over that you want to be recording on the device. Don't go.
I was gonna say the important thing about this is, having worked with Linnell and some of the federated architectures in the past, you usually have to go in and manually set up the synchronization between the databases in those multi-server, multi-level systems, right? And what we did was we said we don't want any of that. We don't want to deal with any of that, right? What we want is you install a server. Okay, that's a 1 server system. You install another server and you just press a button and it becomes 1 system and all that data is replicated, right? And the more servers you add to the system, all you need to do is merge them, and all that information in those databases are going to be replicated instantly. So every server is equal, right? It doesn't matter if it's running on a Ubuntu box or a Windows box or an ARM box, whatever it is, they're all equal. They're all going to synchronize in real time, right? And I can connect to any one of them to see the entire system. I don't need to have it, like James was saying, I don't need to point at one specific central server, right? The other thing is, if one of those servers has access to the internet, they all do, right? Basically, you only need 1 server in that chain to have an internet access in order to be able to connect to the cloud and see the entire system. So it just simplifies the installation, the maintenance, and the support. And along with those things, I think James is going to talk about some of the features, but like auto failover comes with that, right? If you've ever noticed, if you're going and you modify a layout in NX Witness in real time and you press save, anybody who's watching that layout, it will automatically update for them, right? And that's all because of the synchronization between the databases happening in real time.
Yeah, what's funny is actually, I remember when we were still in the distribution company in China, the original architecture that came out was the central management server. And Tony and I were like, no, this is broken. You need to fix this with like a Hive architecture. and then they changed it to the Hive, and it's pretty much been killing projects since. So
Yeah,
it's something we thought about for a long time. But yeah, so the general crux of the way that it works. So if you look at the diagram for a second, you can see we have 4 servers represented at the bottom. So they all cross communicate with each other. This can be on a local TCP/IP backbone, or it can be over a WAN port forwarded, or it can be via our cloud, NX Cloud Connect system. So you can see there on the right-hand side, also proxy there. So what's going through this is basically when you initiate a connection, so you can see our client is initiating a connection. If that client does any system updates to that server, it will push the update to the server that you're connected to, which then gets replicated out across the whole Hive, basically. So let's say we change Tony's email address to Tony tluce@networkoptix.com, then it will then replicate his email address as changed on all servers. So now every single server is aware of the change. On top of that, we have something called a keep alive packet. That's sent every 60 seconds by default. And effectively what that is it is a health monitoring solution. So every server sends a keep alive packet to every other server. So then every server knows, all right, all the servers are good right now. If a server stops seeing the keep alive packet, it then can send an email, it can send a notification, a report to tell you, okay, that server's gone down. And that's one of the really important things about the Hive as well, because in your central management server, if it's the central management server that goes down, there's no notification to tell you that it's gone down. In like the client connected architecture, it's all they're all self-contained, so there is no health monitoring like that kind of built into it. And what's really cool with that, as Tony touched on, is it makes auto failover a feature now. So whereas auto failover before was you need to add extra hardware, you need to add extra licensing, you need to then buy the additional camera licenses. For us, it's a click this button and you've got failover. It is just a feature that you can choose to turn on or off. So basically, if you, in our scenario, let's say server 2 stops sending its keep alive packets over here. Obviously, server 1, 3, and 4 will realize that server 2 is no longer available. Because of the database replication, they know that server 2 had cameras, let's say 51 through to 100 on it. So then those cameras will be spread across the other 3 servers, stay alive,
depending on how you architected your solution. Right?
Yeah, depending on how you've set it up. So obviously this only works across a LAN. It won't jump cameras across a WAN. It would have some definite network issues with that. And obviously their cameras have to be reachable by the other servers.
It can jump across a WAN as long as the WAN has shared subnet, right? So, I mean, it's just like, or you're pulling camera streams outside of the LAN anyways, like you're pulling in cameras at public IP addresses. Yeah. So it's possible. I mean, pretty much anything is possible with our architecture. It's just a matter of figuring out how to do it, right? And then maybe the limitation, James hasn't really talked about the limitations. The only really limitation we have is really the scalability, and that has a lot to do with what hardware you're running it on. That's pretty much it. I mean, we say without talking to us, you could put 100 servers in a system with 100 cameras each. So that's 10,000 cameras. So if you look around and you ask different VMSs out there, how many VMSs can you deploy a 10,000 camera system without even talking to the manufacturer? It's going to be a 0, right? Because the scale of that is just enormous. But with NX Witness, it literally is, you can design a 10,000 camera system without even talking to us. It's 100 servers in a system. It's no problem, right? The reality is we can probably scale beyond that with advanced routing and a couple other kind of tools we have, like James was talking about with the keep alive packets that we can configure. But it's a dead simple architecture, guys, and don't get lost in thinking that it's more complex than we say it is. It literally is as simple and straightforward as we're describing right now.
Yeah. So one of the cool things about the way the architecture works, which most people miss on, is the fact that so when you connect with your computer, obviously you authenticate and connect via the IP address of the server you're connected to. What that does is it actually replies with all the system information, and then you don't stream the servers directly through the camera that you've authenticated or done, assuming there are direct connections. it will directly connect, stream all the video directly from the servers. So you don't actually then have like a ton of server throughput on one server. It will create a direct connection. And this is where it's really cool, which is what Tony touched on, is if your other 3 servers are behind a firewall, so that direct connection isn't reachable because it's been like locked down and you only have one server that's actually accessible. Once it realizes that there is no direct connection, it will proxy the 3 servers through the one server you connected to. So there's a fallback on it. So like Tony was saying, there really is an ability to kind of fit any sort of architecture with the Hive architecture. Like I did some universities where they wanted the kind of system locked down, but they also wanted remote viewing. So they had all the actual recording servers like locked down behind a firewall, and they only had one server available outside of the firewall that actually didn't have any recording or any cameras on it, just because they didn't want anyone to potentially access footage if they did manage to hack that one server. But then that allowed you to proxy all the actual recording servers through it. So it's really customizable. Like Tony said, it's really easy to set up as well. There's no actual having to go into settings, choose proxy or choose like direct connection. Our system automates. It picks the best method, and then if the best method doesn't work, it falls back to the secondary method, the third. So
yeah, there was another cool application in Australia where they wanted to have a redundant server. They wanted to have their licenses hosted on a server completely separate from the system so that they wouldn't never lose their licenses in case one of the server hardware went down, right? So what we said was, okay, just, hey, install a VM at a high availability data center and install our server application and then put the licenses on that server, and you'll never lose the licenses.
Yeah.
Because basically that server, all it's there for is holding the licenses, and it doesn't even have to be on site. Right? It can be completely remote. So it's a really unique architecture that allows you to do a lot of flexible things for your customers.
Yeah. So touching on the license side, that's one other thing I wanted to kind of mention.
That's the question, by the way. I just want to reiterate: the maximum quantity of servers in a Hive is 100. Casey, that's without talking to us. If you have a special situation where you need to have more, you can contact our support team and they can give you some advice on ways to potentially go beyond that. But with cloud, we really allow you to scale to any size. So go ahead.
Yeah. So yeah, just from the licensing side, obviously in the other 2 architectures we mentioned, you have to license the servers or the recording devices to the exact amount of cameras that you have on those devices. So let's say in this scenario where we've got 50 cameras on the server, and you go, actually, I want to put 42 cameras on the first server and 52 on the others, 54, to change how my cameras are being stored or kind of set up. Traditionally, in other scenarios, you have to actually reissue the licenses, which is just a pain, and it also normally incurs cost. For us, as Tony was kind of touching on, all the licenses within a Hive are pulled together. So it doesn't matter if the 200 licenses are on server 1 or if it's 50 licenses per server. You can use those licenses anywhere within devices connected to the Hive. So what that means is when you want to transfer cameras, you don't have to reissue licenses, which saves a lot of time, a lot of cost. If the server that happens to have the licenses attached to it is the server that fails in the failover scenario, you won't lose the licenses straight away. It will give you 30 days to basically either get those licenses transferred over to another server or get the server back up and running again. So even in that scenario, we still built in a fail-safe.
And on top of that, we allow you to deactivate and reactivate the licenses yourself, right? As opposed to you have to, like with most other companies, you have to contact their support, and there may be a fee associated with like deactivating or reactivating licenses. You can do it right in the client. So if you decide you want to change the way you've distributed your licenses across servers, you can do it yourself. So, or even if you decide to replace your hardware, you can do it yourself.
So just real quick, one question that was asked earlier, which I'll reiterate, is someone asked, what's the license impact if you change hardware? So obviously, traditionally it's used MAC addresses. We use the MAC address and the motherboard of the server as a combination to create a hardware key. So if you change your motherboard or your NIC or remove the one with the MAC address, that's when you'll to reissue or reactivate the license. Most companies traditionally use MAC addresses. I think people are moving away from it now because they're too easy to fake.
Oof. Yeah.
So yeah, we use the motherboard as well.
It's also generated by the operating system. So if you do change your operating system on a piece of hardware, your license, your hardware ID is going to change. So you have to reactivate your licenses. So if you switch like Windows to Ubuntu.
Didn't we change that now? It used to be. I thought we changed it. It's now just motherboard and NIC only. According to the support article, it's motherboard and NIC only.
All right, then we made it easier.
Yeah, because we had too many issues where when you upgraded the OS, it was causing problems. So, yeah, unless the support article is wrong, but I think it's the motherboard. Maybe it's.
There's always exceptions. The key issue is we have our support portal. You guys can get support almost in real time, and our team. What happens a lot of times is if there's an issue that pops up that is not known, but we know will affect a lot of customers, then the same day we'll create a patch, and that patch will be available for the same issue that pops up wherever it pops up. So it's our team is really fast about responding to those issues.
Yeah, and we're quite amenable to change in the sense of like you were talking about before, it used to be on the OS system as well. And then we realized that was causing problems. So rather than just being like, well, people shouldn't be changing their OS systems, we went and changed it to make it a lot easier for everyone. So we do listen to market feedback and try and make sure that we're doing everything we can to make everybody's kind of user experience as good as possible. So yeah, that concludes our message from our sponsors. We'll go back to the technical side. So adding storage, the main thing I want to focus on this is please do not use consumer drives when you are installing systems. People do it, and then they wonder why in 6 months' time their drives are all burnt out. There was something really interesting in the Seagate one that he mentioned about the fact that they have a calculation, a yearly calculation for workload of hard drives. And basically consumer drives have X amount of data that you can write within a year. And it's called the workload of the drive. And the surveillance drives are ridiculously higher on the workload in terms of how they've been designed for the amount of data written. So again, check out the Seagate presentation for more information on that. And we won't really touch too much in kind of adding storage and how to select your storage, because as I said, go check out the Seagate one. That's really well covered on selecting storage and what to use.
Yeah.
So the client hardware, this is a really good point to make. So a lot of systems out there require ridiculously high-end computers to just monitor them. So you need extra graphics card, you need high-end CPUs, RAM, to the point where you can't just open it on your laptop and use your system. One of the problems with that is it makes the end user slightly scared to use your system because they have to use this dedicated special computer in the corner. And when someone's scared to use the system and they don't use it very much, their perceived value of the system is a lot lower. When they can actually use the system daily and kind of feel what they have kind of implemented and get to play with it, their perceived value of the system is a lot higher, which means you're much likely to have a more satisfied customer, but you're also much likely to have them expand the system later down the line. So with our systems, we find they expand quite a lot because people like to play with them. So they sit there and they use them. And there's a lot more interaction with the system. Therefore, they go, oh, you know what? I'm missing some cameras over here. I want to be able to do that. I'm missing some stuff over here. I want to be able to add it. So one of the nice things about NX is the fact that it does run on pretty much anything. I used to use my laptop, which was just like a standard 4i5 laptop with nothing special in it, and it would kill like the guys using other VMS platforms, the demos. And they would have like Core i7 NVIDIA GPUs and stuff struggling to stream video. So it's a really important thing just because it makes it more accessible.
Yeah, I guess my point here when I made this slide was if your VMS requires you to have a discrete GPU to run well, maybe it's time to switch. We do the adaptive scaling stuff where we have the switching between the high and low risk streams based off CPU usage and network usage. And the goal of that is basically to make it work on any standard kind of computer that's out there. You don't need a GPU. right? We also introduced Intel Quick Sync decoding in a patch, and it's going to be in our next release towards the end of the year. And that allows you to take really low power hardware that has the Intel HD graphics and then use Quick Sync, which is a built-in decoder, to really improve the performance of high-res video decoding on your client. So you can use a normal laptop and decode a ton of video now with that feature and not have a big impact to your CPU. So you can continue using your CPU for other things, right? So multitasking is not going to be impacted, like James said. So for your thick client hardware, yeah, you should be able to pick stuff that's off the shelf. The things that matter here is the number of HD streams that are going to be displayed on the computer, and then the amount of RAM you have. Those are the two big things that are going to really impact your performance of your computer. But like James said, Core i5 with 16 gigs of RAM, you're going to be probably killing it with the video system anyways, with our system anyways. So.
Yeah, cool. So and then obviously network infrastructure. The main thing I think that's a really good point here is because people get scared of networking a little bit, because obviously it's still somewhat of a new thing within the security industry based on the grand scheme of the security industry. Don't put 10 gigabit switches in if it's only an 8-camera system. It's not needed. Like, I get it. You want to make sure you have the throughputs needed. But it is good to, as we said before, use that system calculator, see where your actual throughputs are going to be, and spec it to the right capacity, because you don't want to be blowing things out the water. Just want to make sure.
Yeah, and the other point on this one was just design your system as if it's closed circuit. So like in my home, I have my demo system set up. That system is all on its own network, right? And it connects to my other network for internet access, but it's got its own IP addresses. It stands alone, because if my internet goes down, the system keeps working like normal, right? When the internet comes back up, now I can connect to it over cloud again, right? But it's going to continue to operate regardless of the outside influence. So if you don't jack into the normal IT infrastructure and put a bunch of cameras on it, right? You're going to kill their speeds. So they're all going to be complaining, right? And you're also going to make your system more vulnerable to issues, because if any part of that existing infrastructure goes down, your system's going to go down with it. So treat it like a closed circuit television system still, with its own separate network.
Yeah, we touched on this on the WSM talk on Tuesday. Make sure your servers have at least 2 NICs, because then one of the NICs you use as your dedicated IP camera network effectively, because as Tony said, you really don't want that on your corporate standard network. 1, because of the data rates, it's going to make everything slow, and 2, because you want to make sure the cameras are stable. And then use the other NIC as like a client network that you then to your normal connections. And then in the scenario we were talking about, where if you are using centralized storage, you want a 3rd NIC where you actually have storage as well, to make sure you're not duplicating data.
Or even a fiber connection, depending on the type of storage it is.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly. So just make sure to kind of keep a mind on those IP, client, and storage networks to make sure they're separated out. So if the storage network suddenly goes crazy, it doesn't affect the just about stability. So that's kind of the main things of the designs. Obviously, make sure everything's documented and handed over, and you get confirmation from the customer before you actually continue. Because I've seen a lot of people that just kind of give the document, don't wait for confirmation and start ordering things. Wait for confirmation. It's going to save you a lot of hassle down the line. But based on the time and the fact that we kind of covered those first 3 elements, like I said, of the design line, this presentation has a lot more in it in terms of when you're handing over, making sure everything's documented, and you're doing the full process. Set things up at your office before going to site. The amount of times we get called when someone's on site and they haven't checked an integration properly and haven't got the right software module or whatever it may be. Make sure you test it first if it's something you haven't done before. If it's integration especially, or if it's a camera, make sure it works properly before you go to site and install everything and then realize that you've got old firmware and you need to update the firmware. It's a lot easier to do before than trying to get this stuff on the day on site. So a couple of things on that. So like I said, check out the presentation, unless there's anything you particularly want to draw attention to here, Tony.
No, I mean, just we can go through real fast. I mean, it's basic stuff, you know. And to have a partner and review it inside your company. Don't before you give it to external stuff, right? Have your own team review it. Go to the next one. Have a part. If you have integrations, have your tech partner that you're working with on the integrations just review it, make sure everything's cool, like you haven't missed anything important. Go to the next one. And then, of course, you know, after you send the proposal, call your customer up and be like, hey, I want to go over this with you. Right. Because at that point in time, if they have any questions or need any clarifications, you have the opportunity to modify your proposal or modify your system design based off their feedback. One thing that I said in the presentation that we didn't go over was, you know, don't be afraid to give multiple options for the same exact system architecture in terms of hardware, right? Quoting with 2 to 3 options sets you up in terms of credibility, because you're saying, here, look, this is a cheap option. This is the one I don't really recommend, but you could potentially get by with it, right? Here's a medium option where, you know, it's not the best, but it's not the cheap stuff, and it'll be pretty solid, right? And here's the one I really recommend, right? With all the bells and whistles, the thing's gonna last you the longest, it's gonna perform the best, right? So it's just a way to build credibility with your customer. You're acting as a consultant. You're not a salesperson, right? You're a security consultant. Your job is to help them understand the system as well as you understand the system. All right, good. Yeah, so fixing and iterating is all part of that. You get the opportunity to do that when you have a review with the customer. I'd say one thing on that last slide was just don't be adamant that your solution is the only solution. If they have a problem with it, you know, don't throw out the whole thing. If the customer says, I really want this one feature that this other VMS has, right? Well, talk about all the other benefits they're getting along with this feature, right? Or along with this new system that you're recommending to them, right? Let them see the whole picture, right? Yeah, we don't control the PTZ camera exactly the same way as your old VMS does. So what? Is it really that important? Right? You like look at all the other additional benefits you're getting here, right? Don't be stuck on this one little UX thing, right? So go ahead. So deployment's easy. I mean, you guys are integrators, but like we said, consider pre-configuring, pre-installing before you go to site. With us, it's not that big a deal, honestly. The only thing you really need to pre-configure and pre-install is going to be our servers. And that's just to make sure all the drives are up, all the OS is working properly, and the licenses are activated. The cameras and the networking stuff, it's going to be automatically discovered. So you don't have to worry about it with us. Go on. Yeah. One thing I always recommend is just making sure to monitor the process on site. Send your customers SMSs or emails just saying, hey, this is the stage we're at with the installation, right? If it takes one day, even throughout the day, hey, I'm at this stage, send them an update, right? I'll be done at this time, right? If you'd like to meet and review the thing. Go ahead. So handing over, I mean, the most important thing for handover is, I'd say, put everything, including your original proposal and any changes that were made along the way, into one big folder and hand it to the customer. That's why it's called a handover. You're going like, here's your folder full of documentation, buddy, right? Don't forget to tell them their passwords. Because if they here's the problem. If they contact us and they want a password, we're going to tell them to go back to you, right? We will not, for the most part, help people reset their passwords. There's a method, right? We don't like to do it. If you do put their system on the cloud, you know, then they can reset the password themselves. But if it's a local system, make sure they have the right passwords. It's pretty basic, but it's kind of a big deal. Go ahead. Training, I mean, James, this is in James' presentation when I was reading through it, but basically, yeah, sit down with your customers and give them training. The good thing is that we did the training for you. So you just literally have to point them to like a place and they can go through the training with our operator certification. But, you know, giving them training is going to get them more engaged in the system. They're going to use it for more things. And like James said earlier, they're going to expand how they use the system. One of our customers is SpaceX. Right. And they have 5,000 people that use our software every day that are not security people, right? Because they figured out they could use it for everything from engine tests to watching how fast the rockets get built, right? Get built and move out the door. So they have a giant group of people that use that stuff and engage with it in all sorts of ways. Even marketing videos for the time lapse and things like that you guys see coming out of SpaceX. So it's pretty cool. So give them training and get them engaged with the system. They'll love it and they'll try and figure out more things to do with it. So I think that's it.
Cool. That was the last one. Yeah, I think training is a really big point. Like the amount of times we have people kind of reach out to us, end users, just kind of ask questions about the system. And once we kind of spend an hour on the phone with them or in a team viewer session or something, and just running over some of the key features, their user experience level goes from here to here. It's and it only takes an hour just to really show them around the software because it is very intuitive. And so once you've kind of got the basic crux of it, you can then expand and do it yourself. So yeah, super important. So for anyone that has questions, please feel free to ask away right now. We'd love to have some. Doesn't have to be about NX directly, just anything. Even if you've got some input to add in yourself, if you're highly experienced in certain areas, you want to say something that you'd like to share, please just chuck it in there. Because like I said,
that being said, we understand it's Friday evening in Europe, so like you guys can also bail if you just want to go have a beer or something.
Yeah.
But yeah, any questions you guys want to ask, anything at all, feel free to throw them out in the chat or the QA.
So I'll list a couple of questions we had from this morning sessions because we actually had quite a lot of questions. So another question was how many cameras can we fit on a server? And one of the things I like to say is it's not necessarily how much can we fit on a server, it's how much can we fit on a server instance. Because like Tony was mentioning earlier, we put 10 VMs on one Dell server. So a single instance of the NX Witness server software can have 128 cameras. And part of the reason we have that limitation is because of how lightweight we are. And the fact that we can run 128 cameras on a single core of a i3 processor, is pretty crazy compared to everything else. So
I'd say we recommend though not going above 100 if you can, right? And that's just because as you approach 128, each camera has 4 threads that it's pulling from the CPU. And in a multi-threaded environment, when you get above 512, you start to see rapid degradation in performance of a machine. That's it. That's the only reason we say don't go above 128 is because the performance will start to drag on it. So even better, just stay below 100, right? Most of the time, your storage is not going to be limited by the CPU or the RAM. It's going to be limited by the amount of storage you have on it, right? Unless you're using a really high density storage device. And in that case, you're probably using a Xeon processor, which is overkill for us. And then you'll probably get, like, you're going to want to virtualize it and turn it into multi-servers anyways, because then you have failover across all those suckers. So even if one server application goes down, the other ones are taking over for it. So
yeah, exactly. And like when we did the testing with Seagate, it was a Dell Xeon Gold CPU. So we basically had 10 VMs on there, each running.
We had 20 VMs on it.
Oh, sorry, 20 VMs.
We had 20 VMs. 10 of them were camera emulators. Yeah. And then other 10 of them were our server application running. So we were emulating 1,000 4K cameras and recording them and streaming it back to clients and everything like that, all cloud connected on a single machine.
So yeah, and like even when other BMS providers that I've worked with in the past, they didn't have any limits theoretically on how many cameras they could put on because they just hadn't coded any in, but they still didn't recommend doing more than 128 on their own recommendation. Yeah, it's in theory it's doable on other BMSs, but we can do it via VMs. But we also think stability is more important than I was going to say bad use. So I just edited myself.
Well, the big servers also cost a lot more money. So if you can do it with more lightweight hardware, you're going to save yourself some money, especially if you're going to replicate that hardware across like a system. So,
well, and that's the thing. The reason that a lot of the other providers want to put as much on a single server as possible is because as soon as you get to 2 servers, you actually have to add a 3rd server because you need that management server. Whereas with NX, we don't have that because of the Hive architecture. So it really doesn't affect the total cost too much by going to 2 servers. So
And we have no server fees. It's just
yeah.
camera. That's it.
So if anyone wants to throw in any questions, Oscar, I don't know if you want to make any comments. Sergey and Oscar's been very quiet in this one.
Yeah, I feel like Silvio should have questions.
Yeah, my friend Silvio it's online. He has been on most of the webinars. Well, I spoke a lot on the morning one, so it's good to have Tony here and to listen to Tony. We did had a question from Casey earlier regarding drones, right? And we have Tony. Maybe we can have a more a larger answer. So Casey was asking, do we support drones and how we do it?
Do we?
Yeah. Well, sorry, go on, Tony. I'll let you.
Yeah, I mean, drones are. Most drones have the ability to stream like an RTSP stream, right? So the ability to capture drone video is really going to depend on your network capabilities for the most part, and Wi-Fi is not known as the most reliable thing in the world. Now that 5G is coming out and 4G has been around for a while, the more drones that have those capabilities built into them, I think the live video from a drone is going to become more and more commonplace. In terms of flying a drone, we actually had companies in the past that created an integration so that you could pull their UI into our client and you could fly the drone from our client, from our desktop client, using just HTML buttons and everything like that, using the browser, right? So we don't, the big answer is we don't have any direct relationship with drone manufacturers other than the ones that have done some integration with us. And we don't promote any specific drone solution out there. But drones can either be live streamed in using an available RTSP stream, or they can you can use them like a virtual camera where you take the offline footage and you import it into the archive, like you would with an action cam or a mobile phone. So you could keep that footage there. But in terms of integrating to a drone platform, it should be fairly straightforward. If you've got one that's interested in doing it, our API will allow them to do pretty much anything they want, including creating controls for launching those drones and everything in our client. We just haven't seen anybody take the initiative yet and do that.
Yeah, just to add to what you were saying about the virtual cameras. So even if you're not live streaming them, we have a cool feature called virtual camera, which is really good for like body worn cameras for police and like that as well, where basically once they come back to like a station or a location servers are at, you can actually download all the footage and build it into the timeline. So it's completely reviewable and time coded as part of the system with all your live cameras. So it's a pretty cool feature for body worns and like drones.
And it's not licensed.
And it's not licensed. Yeah.
Free. Virtual camera. Free. Yeah. So you can do that for free.
The only thing I'll mention is we haven't seen Oscar's twin brother on this webinar, so I feel.
No, Oscar. Yeah, Oscar has a twin brother. I found out about this. That's pretty interesting. Is he gonna bring you some coffee?
You have to talk, Oscar, otherwise they can't see you.
You're muted, Oscar.
I'm muted. Yeah, I was asking my brother for the coffee. I think Casey asked me earlier the name of my brother. It's pretty shy. It's in better shape than me. Thanks, man. Yeah, so Casey, I will tell you the name of my brother later. It's quite shy though.
Oscar. You don't know the name of your brother now? Is that what you're saying?
No, I know the name. It's just he's shy. He's not, he doesn't.
I think
he doesn't.
It's Oliver.
Yeah. So for those of you that have been on the webinars all week, you can see we've gone slightly mad by the last.
We're hitting the end. Yeah, we were before you guys came on too. We were playing with all sorts of backgrounds and like if you guys use Zoom, the ability to kind of change your background, get trippy, or be in the tech universe, or we were thinking about having the news, going through the news as well. So
Just from Casey, just added to her question to say exactly. Drone use cases are increasing. Right now, we know we have to set up another media server to encode the RTMP to RTSP, because most drones send in RTMP versus RTSP, and then they'll reach out to their customers to dry. So just some feedback for anyone on the call. Apparently, drone cases are increasing, which you do see it when you go to the expos, but I don't know what's marketing versus actual.
Hey, James, show Casey the for RTMP. That is a good request. Requesting us to support RTMP is a great feature request. So where you should go to do that is the support portal in the community underneath feature requests, right? I was going to say, James, you might want to pull it up and show these guys exactly where the community is.
Yeah.
So in case you're not familiar, support.networkoptics.com, and then click on the community section, and you'll be able to ask for features. Our product management team and everyone pays attention to that support portal. Community at the top right, or right down in the bottom middle, and then go to feature requests or new feature ideas. Sorry. So you can see there's 346 right there.
Yeah, so just we touched on this earlier as well, where someone was asking about the storage calculator, Jan, who's on most of our webinars from Belgium. He was saying that asking about adding additional resolutions, adding 360 cameras and stuff. Tony will be better than answering this, but from my understanding, that's kind of locked in place at the moment. We're going to revamp the whole storage calculator at some point. So we're not doing much additions to it, but definitely worth putting on the support forum so our devs team know that it needs assessing.
Yeah, and then also upvote it. You see the votes on the right? Everybody forgets to do that. But basically, if you see something you agree with, vote it up. Right there, a little up button. Vote it up. And if you have an idea that you want to get done, put it up there and send an email to all your buddies and say, go vote this sucker up, right? Because that's gonna impact. It's gonna impact whether or not we do stuff. Is the amount of activity, comments, and votes, right? So if you see something if you see a feature that you really like, throw a comment on there and say, yes, please, God, do this, right? If you see, if you have a new feature idea that you want to get the attention raised on, put it here, vote it up, get your friends to comment on it, and say similar things to you, and it's much more likely to make its way to the top of our development list, because we get inundated with like feature requests, guys. I mean, all the time, right? And we want to do them all, but we have to do them in order of impact to the business and to you guys out there. We look for the highest impact stuff. So.
Yeah. It's also workload, right? So if it's like a really complicated big feature, then it's going to take a longer time to put in, whereas it might be a minute change that you need. Even if it's a tiny thing, it's worth listing on here, because it might be something that we go, oh yeah, that makes sense, and we can fit it in pretty quick. So it doesn't matter how big or small the feature, add it to here. And Silvio just asked a question, and it's the question I ask all the time, so I'm glad. He said he's asking the same question he asked Oscar previously, that he has an SI partner asking if Network Optics will offer the face privacy dynamic masking to protect people's identity, and the referred to a community discussion. Do you have any update on this?
So you're talking about face pixelation?
Yeah, identity masking.
I've been asking for that for 3 years. I think it's the number one thing that we should do as a company, is to create a universal pixelation mechanism that allows you to pixelate anything you want in the system based off of especially now with the AI and the objects. Any object, any person that you want to pixelate based off its metadata tags or its type, you should be able to do, right? The issue is we have to think about it from a rights perspective as well. So let's say we implemented that feature, right? Well, it's got to be extended to the mobile client, it's got to be extended to the web client, and then it's got to have configurable rights to it. Meaning, if if you want to have one person be required and only one person can depixelate faces, right? Then that is fairly straightforward, right? If you want to have it so that you have, I need two people, two administrators to come in, or two face pixelation people, right, with those rights come in order to be able to depixelate it, right? Then that's another request. So our guys are sitting around, not sitting around, they're working on the different rights that are associated with this, and they're working on the spec for all the downstream affected technology. The web clients, the mobile clients, right? Exporting video. It's not a simple request, right? But to kind of get back around to answer your question, we all want it. We all know why it's valuable, and it's just a matter of time before it gets done. It is a critical feature, especially these days with privacy and security becoming so important. So we're in line with your thoughts.
But yeah, definitely go make some noise on the forum, Sylvia, if you because I'd like.
Yeah, that one definitely make a lot of noise on the forum about.
Yeah, I think Tony and I will join you. You'll see us on there making the noise. So yeah, it's I get asked it a lot, obviously being in Europe, with everybody thinking tax and GDPR. So it is a feature that we are pushing for internally as well. But like Tony said, it's a lot more complex than just a single feature. A great question now coming from Casey. She said, since it's Friday night here, what is Oscar's brother's name? That's my last question.
All right, Casey, I'll just line you and then talk to you privately on my brother, right? Introduce him to you. It's Friday night, it's still early. All right.
Sylvia says thanks. Cool.
Right.
If there's any other questions?
It's Brosker.
All right, I think it's almost 90 minutes. Maybe we should wrap it up to close this very nice week. Thanks, James, for being the main guy to organize this. It has been wonderful. I have been receiving emails about it. A lot of people are waiting for the videos to be on. Some of them couldn't make it to all of it. And then, thanks, Tony, for also, organizing all these webinars. I think we have done more than 70, right, this year?
As of this week, before this week, it was 65, and we just did 10 with James, so at least 75. And I think we did 2 or 3 others this week as well, so we're probably up closer to 80 at this point.
Yeah, and all very informative. So yeah, I just want to thank everyone for joining the NX Security Week. I think it's been really good. I've learned a lot from our guest talkers as well. It's been a lot of fun. And thanks to everybody that joined all the sessions. And like I said, please feel free, if you think they were good, to share them among people. It doesn't matter. They don't even have to be an NX customer, right? It's all about kind of that knowledge transfer like we're talking about. So again, thanks everyone for joining, and all the information in terms of the webinars and presentations should be uploaded next week. We'll have to ask our marketing.
They should be up very quickly. Have you checked my NX? Some of them might already be up there.
No, I spoke to Kat yesterday. She hasn't edited, but
well, then she's behind. She's supposed to get webinars up within 48 hours of when they're done.
Yeah.
So I'll have to yell at Kat to get it done sooner. No, we're actually the reason that it's delayed for this time is we're doing a separate tab on the webinars page where Security Week's going to have its own section. So it'll be up early next week with all these presentations. Like James said, thanks everybody. Hope you guys have a good weekend.
Oh, we got Casey put her hand.
Casey raised her hand. I don't know why.
She started drinking already. All right. All right. Thanks again, everyone. Like I said, reach out to sales guys.
Thank you, guys. Thank you, Sylvia, Casey, and some of the guys have been on most of the webinars. Thank you, guys.
Nice hamster, Oscar. I'm going to the beach. I'll see you guys later.
Cheers, guys.
All right, Tony. Nice seeing you. Cheers.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye, guys.